The first person I called in an emergency was my mother. The last call she ever had to make in one was to me. That's not luck. That's 53 years of showing up. One ordinary morning at a time. My mother, Rebecca Watson, never made things complicated. She didn't have to. She was the woman who dragged a folding chair to every one of my Little League games, who kept making my lunch long after I was old enough to be mortified by it, who stayed up until she heard my key in the door, not because she was checking on me, but because she genuinely couldn't rest until she knew I was safe. She didn't talk about love. She just handed it to you, over and over, without ever asking for credit. When my father died 12 years ago, a gray Wednesday in November, she didn't collapse. She grieved the only way she knew how, quietly, with her spine straight. She sold one of the cars to pay for the funeral and didn't tell me until the checks had already cleared. She kept the lights on, the mortgage paid, and somehow still put a hot dinner on the table every single Sunday for whoever wandered in. In 12 years, she never once called to tell me she was struggling. So when my phone rang at 7:42 on a Wednesday morning and I heard her say her chest felt funny, I didn't stop to think. 53 years of a mother like that doesn't raise a son who hesitates. It raises a son who moves. What nobody warns you about is the person who might try to stop you at the door. My name's Wesley Watson, 53 years old. I coach youth baseball on the weekends and, for most of my adult life, I confused keeping the peace with actually having any. Took me a long time to figure out those aren't the same thing. That Wednesday, January 14th, I was in the kitchen watching the coffee maker do its slow drip, like even it wasn't in a hurry to start the day, when my phone lit up on the counter. Mom. I answered before the second ring finished. Wesley. Her voice was thin. Wrong. This was a woman who'd buried a husband, survived a recession, and had a hip replaced without complaining to a single soul. Mom. You okay? I didn't want to bother you. 82 years old and still apologizing for needing help. My chest is tight, she said, and my left arm keeps going numb. I'm coming, don't move. I'm sure it's nothing. Wesley. Mom. Sit down, I'm coming. I hung up and gave myself 3 seconds to think. My truck was at Kowalski's getting a new alternator, wouldn't be ready till Friday. Eve's Honda was sitting in the driveway with a full tank. Eve was upstairs, in the shower, taking the kind of unhurried 30-minute shower she took every morning like she had somewhere glamorous to be. I went to the bottom of the stairs. Eve. Nothing. Eve. The water cut off. A pause that lasted too long. What? Not a question, a complaint. I need your car. Mom's having chest pains, I have to get her to St. Francis. Silence, not the thinking kind. The kind where somebody's already decided and is just figuring out how to phrase it. She came to the top of the stairs a half-minute later, towel wrapped around her head, robe cinched tight, face like stone. Wesley. I can't today. Eve. Her arms going numb. Call an ambulance. You know she hates ambulances, ever since Dad. Then call somebody else. She was already backing toward the bedroom. I've got dinner with Joanne and the girls tonight. And a full day before that. I am not spending my whole day in a waiting room. I just stood there. Did she actually just? Eve. My voice came out smaller than I wanted it to. Her arm is going numb. She looked at me, and there was no worry in her face at all. Just annoyance. Like I'd asked her to reschedule a dentist appointment. She's your mother. Wesley. Not mine. A beat. Figure it out. The door closed softly behind her. Not a slam. A slam would have meant she felt something. This was worse. Calm. Deliberate. Like she'd just told me we were out of orange juice. I stood in the hallway for one more second. Then I called Clinton. Clinton Webb, 4 houses down. 71 years old. Retired electrician. Drove an old Honda Civic that had earned every one of its scratches. He'd known my mother 20 years. He was at my father's funeral. Front row. In a suit he probably hadn't worn since. He picked up before the first ring finished. Wes, what do you need? Mom's having chest pains. My truck's in the shop. Eve's not available. Can you drive us to St. Francis? Give me 4 minutes. No hesitation. No conditions. No dinner to check first. I called Mom back. I'm on my way. Clinton's driving. Just sit tight and unlock the door. I really didn't want to make a fuss. Mom, sit down. A small, Almost laugh. Okay, baby. Clinton was outside in under 4 minutes. The drive to St. Francis took 9. Mom sat beside me in the back seat in her good blue coat. Like she'd dressed for something important, because she had. She apologized the entire way. I'm sorry to pull you away from your morning, Clinton. Wasn't doing anything but yelling at the news. Anything good on it? Nothing ever is. She actually laughed at that. And I sat there watching Hartford go by through the window, feeling two things at once, grateful for Clinton, and something colder toward Eve that I wasn't ready to look at directly yet. We checked into the ER at 8:27. A nurse named Beverly, the kind of no-nonsense you only get from someone who's seen every version of a bad morning, had Mom in a room within 15 minutes. The doctor, a tall, unhurried man named Dar Cole, ran an EKG and ordered blood work without making a single thing feel like an emergency, even though it clearly was one. You did the right thing getting her here fast, he told me, before disappearing behind the curtain. Mom looked up at me, scared for the first time all morning, and I told her to just do whatever he said. She nodded, reached up, touched my cheek. You came, she said, like she genuinely hadn't been sure I would. 2 words. They nearly took my knees out from under me. I sat in that waiting room for almost 3 hours. Bad coffee, muted game show on the TV bolted to the wall, plastic chairs that had clearly never been designed with comfort in mind. My phone sat face up in my lap the entire time. Eve never texted. Not once, not even to ask if her mother-in-law was alive. At 11:04, Dar Cole came out and told me it had been a mild cardiac event, not a full heart attack, but enough to keep her overnight for observation. She was stable. She was also already complaining about the lack of a television in her room, which told me more than any test result could have. I called Clinton, who'd been sitting patiently in the parking lot the entire time, and told him she was okay. Thank God, he said, and meant every syllable of it. Clinton, thank you, really. That's just what people do, Wes. I sat with that sentence for a long moment after we hung up. Some people. I stayed with Mom until 4. We watched half a game show and she beat me twice at a word game she invented on the spot, using hospital equipment and state capitals, sharper than me even hooked up to a heart monitor. At 3:47, right before I had to leave, she caught my hand. Eve didn't come. It wasn't a question. She had dinner plans, I said, because there was no better way to say it. Mom didn't gasp, didn't raise her voice. She just looked toward the window, where the light was hitting the Hartford skyline gold and tired, and nodded slowly, like she was filing something away for later. I kissed her forehead at 4:02 and walked out into air that felt like it could clean a wound. Clinton drove me home in a silence that didn't need filling. Somewhere on Blue Hills Avenue, watching the last of the leaves blow across the windshield, I understood something with total clarity. I wasn't angry at Eve. I was finished. Thursday morning I was awake before my alarm, the kind of awake that comes from something sitting on your chest all night. I lay there on my side of the bed, the same side I'd slept on for 11 years, leaving room for a woman who never once reached for it in the dark. Eve slept like nothing had happened, because to her, nothing had. I went down, made coffee with the loud machine on purpose, and didn't feel a shred of guilt about it. She'd chosen a dinner reservation over my mother's numb arm. She could survive some noise. She found me at the table a little later, robe cinched, glancing between me and the coffee pot like she was recalibrating. You made coffee. Every morning for 11 years, I said, didn't realize that still surprised you. She poured her own cup, leaned against the counter, and let a long silence sit there before finally asking, how's Rebecca? Rebecca. Not Mom, not even, your mom. Like she was asking about a coworker she barely remembered meeting. Stable, they're keeping her another day. How was dinner? I asked, mostly to watch her face. She blinked, just slightly. It was fine, Wesley, I want you to understand, yesterday was complicated for me. Complicated. Her mother-in-law was having a cardiac event and Eve was complicated by a reservation. Eve. I said her name the same flat, final way my mother had said mine the night before. I'm just trying to explain. I heard you the first time, at the bottom of the stairs. I rinsed my mug, grabbed my spare keys, and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" "To see my mother." I didn't look back to see her reaction. I didn't need to. Clinton drove me again. No questions. An old country station humming low on the radio. Some friendships just don't need narration. Mom was upright when I got there, color back in her cheeks, working a crossword in her own nightgown because she'd flatly refused the hospital one. 7 letters, she said without looking up. Betrayal. I froze in the doorway. She glanced over her glasses, deadpan, for the crossword. Wesley. I laughed so hard a nurse checked on us. We sat together for a while in that easy, comfortable quiet that only exists between people who've loved each other long enough not to need to fill it. Then she closed the puzzle book, folded her hands, and said, "I want to call Paul this morning." Paul Logan, the family lawyer. 31 years in practice. The man who'd handled Dad's estate and drawn up her will 6 years back. "Mom, you don't have to do anything today." Wesley Andrew Watson. All 3 names. I hadn't heard that combination since I was 17. Do not finish that sentence. I shut my mouth. "I've worked my whole life," she said, steady and clear. "Your father and I built something so it would go to people who showed up." A pause. "Eve didn't show up. Wesley. Not yesterday. Not at your father's funeral. Not when I needed rides after my hip surgery. Not 2 Christmases ago when you had to leave dinner because I had the flu. And not yesterday, when my heart was trying to tell me something." Every example landed exactly where she meant it to. "I'm not angry," she added, and she genuinely wasn't. "I'm just accurate." She already had Paul's direct line written on a slip of paper tucked inside her glasses case. This wasn't a decision made in a hospital bed. This was a decision she'd been sitting on for years, and the hospital bed had simply removed her last excuse to keep waiting. "Stay," she told me, when I offered to step out. So I stayed, and I listened to my mother calmly, deliberately rewrite her entire estate over the phone from a hospital bed, using words like "clearly" and "today if possible," a woman who had never once made an impulsive decision in her life, finally making the most decisive one of it. Paul Logan showed up at 2, briefcase in hand, and spent 47 minutes with my mother behind a curtain of privacy I didn't push through. I won't detail everything that was said. Some conversations belong only to the people who had them. But by the time he clicked his pen shut, the will Eve had spent 11 years quietly assuming she'd benefit from no longer existed in that form. The house on Maplewood Drive, my father's investment accounts, my mother's jewelry, the 1967 Mustang my dad spent 4 years restoring by hand, the one that still smelled faintly like him when you opened the garage, $20,000. Specifically earmarked for the animal shelter where Mom had volunteered every 3rd Saturday for over a decade. Eve's name appeared exactly 0 times in any of it. "Your mother," Paul said quietly on his way out, glancing back at her hunched contentedly over her crossword, "is one of the sharpest people I've worked with in 31 years. "Yeah," I said, "I know." Friday morning I picked up my truck from Kowalski's, new alternator. An oil change he threw in for free because our kids used to play ball together. Fresh wiper blades I hadn't even asked for. My phone started buzzing while I signed the paperwork. Eve. I let it go to voicemail. I didn't have anything to say to her yet, and I wasn't going to force it. By the time I pulled out of the lot, she'd called 5 times. Something was clearly happening on her end, and for once, I wasn't in a hurry to find out what. I picked Mom up at 8:53. She was already arguing with hospital policy about the wheelchair. I had a cardiac event, not a personality transplant, and stood up out of it the second we cleared the automatic doors. Beverly the nurse hugged her goodbye like they'd known each other for years, not 4 days. My phone kept lighting up on the drive home. Eve, Eve, Eve. 11 missed calls before 9 in the morning. Mom just looked out the window, calm as anything, like a woman completely at peace with a decision she'd already made. I got her settled back into the house on Maplewood Drive, made her tea exactly the way she liked it, went through every new prescription label out loud while she listened with both hands wrapped around her mug. "Sit down," she said eventually, patting the chair across from her, the same kitchen table where she'd once held my hand the morning after we buried my father, without needing to say a single word. I sat. "What I did with the will," she said, taking my hand in both of hers, "wasn't about punishing Eve. It was about giving what your father and I built to somebody who actually understands what building something together means. She squeezed my hand. You understand that? I did. In my bones. And Wesley, her voice softened, but didn't waver. I need you to think about your own life now, not the money, whether you're happy, whether you're loved the way you deserve to be. She held my eyes. You've been showing up alone for a long time, baby. A man like you deserves somebody standing next to him when he does. The kitchen went completely still. Somewhere outside, a dog barked twice and quit. I know, Mom, I said, and for once my voice didn't try to hide anything. She patted my hand, satisfied, and nodded toward my buzzing phone. Are you going to get that? Not yet, I said. The corner of her mouth twitched. Not yet, she repeated, like she was tasting the patience in it. By the time I got home, Eve had called 34 times. She was on the edge of the couch when I walked in, phone clutched in both hands, eyes red and sleepless. Something in her face had cracked open, not guilt exactly, but the look of someone who'd spent an entire day realizing exactly what she'd lost. I've been calling all day, she said, standing. I know. I hung my keys on the hook and thought about the EKG, the enzyme panel, Cole's careful voice, and about the bread basket getting passed around a restaurant table while my mother's heart tried to warn her something was wrong. Did you know? She asked. About the will? No. I found out with everyone else. Her composure finally slipped. Underneath it was real fear, the kind that shows up right when consequences catch up to choices. She cut me out completely. Paul's office called to confirm it. Wesley, do you understand what that means? I understand exactly what it means. Then talk to her. Tell her it was a misunderstanding, that I was going to come to the hospital. You just what? She had nothing. I took one step closer, not angry, just finally, fully present in a way I hadn't let myself be in years, because I had nothing left to protect anymore. You had dinner with Joanne and the girls, I said, while my mother was in a hospital bed having a cardiac event, while I sat in a waiting room drinking terrible coffee alone, while Clinton, a neighbor, not even family, sat in that parking lot for 3 hours, because that's just what people do. The color drained from her face. My mother made her decision the same way you made yours, I said, clearly, without asking anyone's permission. She's spent 82 years showing up for people, I went on, quieter now, for my father, for me. She's never once chosen dinner over somebody who needed her. She just finally stopped expecting everyone else to do the same. Eve looked at me like she was seeing me clearly for the first time in years, and understanding, all at once, what she'd actually lost. Not the money, not the house, me. Her phone buzzed in her hand. My mother's name lit up the screen. She looked at me, something like hope flickering across her face. I felt the last thread of 11 years finally go slack. Not with anger, with something quieter than that. I'm going to go check on my mother, I said, picking my keys back up. I opened the door. The cold hit my face, clean and honest. You should probably answer that, I said, glancing back at her, phone still glowing in her hand. Then I shut the door behind me and breathed out something I didn't realize I'd been holding for 11 years. I stood on that porch a long moment, letting the January air settle into me, not anger, not the satisfaction of getting even, just clarity, the kind that only comes after you finally stop convincing yourself that surviving something counts as living it. I hadn't been married for 11 years. I'd been enduring 11 years. There's a difference, and I finally understood it completely. I got in my truck, let the radio hum low, something my father used to whistle in the garage on Saturday mornings. I didn't decide anything else that night, just one thing, quiet and certain, I wasn't going back into that house. Not that night. And somewhere underneath everything, I already knew it wasn't just that night, either.